Good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome you this morning. This morning we will have a panel session for 4.3, Education for Sustainability and Inclusiveness for People and Nature. So let me present my co-chairs. Mariana Bozesan, President AQAL Capital and Foundation Munich, Germany. She will speak later on. Aleksandra, Drecun, President Intersection Center for Science and Innovation, Belgrade, Serbia, Director for Europe Harvard Alumni Association, and Radmilo Pešić, Faculty of Agriculture, University of Belgrade, Serbia. So I would like just to remind you that organizer insisted on maximum 10 minutes discussions, so I have privilege to be the first speaker. I will try to briefly mention you some key issues that I was asked about: inclusiveness, education, and environment. So I will start. I'm used to speak standing. I believe that you hear me, so there is no need for the microphone. I'm Petar Bulat. I'm coming from the Faculty of Medicine, University of Belgrade, and Serbian Institute of Occupational Health. I will give you a short introduction, and then I will focus on the topic. I believe that all of you share opinion that education is the key factor for development of society. But if you look to the picture, we have education, which leads to employment. Employment leads to income, and income leads to proper housing, economic prosperity, and proper diet. And economic prosperity leads to the proper education. So we have one positive vicious circle. Rich parents could provide good education for their children, then they will generate more income, and we have vicious circle. And all these aspects also affect the health, because I'm coming from Faculty of Medicine, so I should mention the health effects as well. So societies through development and political debate decided on educational systems, which is the best for them. It could be public, private, mixed, but the question is the level of obligatory education. This is one of the very important topics, and the poor society is usually set up step this very low, rich one higher. So each of these systems has advantages and disadvantages regarding the inclusiveness, which is the key for prosperity. The idea of inclusive education is to include people who might otherwise be excluded or marginalized, such as those who have physical or mental disabilities and members of minority groups. I will present you a situation in Serbia. Levels of education of Serbian rural versus urban population. It is obvious that urban population has much more education than rural one, and the situation is even worse if you take a look to the slide on Roma versus other Serbian population. Roma population is less educated than other Serbian populations, and this is especially in the case of university degree. Roma with university degree is almost negligible, so it creates a lot of problems in this population. If you are looking for inequalities in access to education, which creates then social inequality and leads to social and political tensions, you will see that a line between education and unemployment is different. Unemployment generates low income. Low income generates poor housing. it will not generate economic prosperity, but poorness, and also it will provide improper diet and tobacco use, drug alcohol abuse. And it will create at the end a negative vicious circle. So poor families could not provide good education for their children, so we will have negative vicious circle. If you're talking about environmental impacts on the education, I will mention one very famous example of from United States. They had wooden houses and they use lead-based paints for painting the walls inside. And from 60s, lead-based paints are banned. But these old houses, they have, due to aging, there is chips of these old paints and lead dusts in those houses. So the children living in those houses are exposed to higher levels of lead. And lead leads to problems in development, especially intellectual development. And the children with less intellect, they could not manage very good in school. So it leads to improper education. Then improper education leads to low income. And this then leads to poor housing. And poor housing means, again, these old houses with lead dust in them. So it is negative vicious circle of, and on this slide you will see poor housing leads to low education, then unemployment, low income, and then low income generates crime and violence, generates tobacco use, alcohol use, and also leads to the poor housing conditions. So the negative vicious circle is again closed. So at the end, education is a key factor for sustainable development of society, but it should be always kept in mind that only inclusive education is effective. In 21st century, it is unacceptable to have inequalities in access to educational institutions. We should join efforts in developing effective educational systems which will prevent inequalities in educational process and provide educational background for sustainable development. Thank you very much. So now I will ask Mariana Bokshan.
Thank you very much. So, good morning, everybody. I'd like to keep my promise from yesterday and give you a very pragmatic example on how to apply these philosophies of integration, inclusivity, UN SDGs within planetary boundaries. If you could please bring up my slides, I'd really appreciate it. So, we'll remember, I need technical help, please. Before we get my slides up, I'd like to summarize what I talked about yesterday. So the main topics are how do we do what we do on a daily basis, particularly as an educator in your case, and as an entrepreneur and an investor in my case, within the context of climate. Okay, great. So within the context of climate change, artificial intelligence threats or exponential threats, or the application of unsafe AIs, which is one of my passions, and also nuclear threats, which of course is something that few of us can do something about unless you're a politician. So within this context, we also have the decision of the UN to apply the Sustainable Development Goals, but the question is, how do we apply the 17? Because some of them, they're aspirational, but they're contradicting. If we focus on number one, as we did over the past couple of decades, like China, they managed to lift 30 million people every year out of poverty, and of course, at the expense of climate, because every other week, I think they started a coal plant, energy power plant. So the important task here is to apply these UN SDGs within planetary boundaries, and here I referred yesterday to a research paper that was done, research, not only the paper, but research paper based on research over the past 50 years on how to apply the UN SDGs within planetary boundaries, which are 9 of. And so here I shared with you what we've done over the past, since 1980s. On the left-hand side, on the y-axis, you see the 9 planetary boundaries. So we left the green operating system and moved fast toward implementing more and more UN SDGs, which are represented on the x-axis. So here's the number of the UN SDGs out of the 17 that were implemented at any one time. So when we continue on this path, or if we continue on this path, which is what we're currently doing, then we will end up 2050 out of a safe environment, planetary environment, into an area where we won't be able to implement all 17, maybe 11. So what this Stockholm Resilience Center, they did again a projection based on data collected over the past 50 years. What happens if we go faster and the same way? We will end up with not more UN SDGs implemented, and we will not be able to get out of the unsafe planetary boundaries. If we try harder, we will end up in the same space. But they identified a smart way, and this is what I would encourage every one of you to look at and see how within your environment, your series of activities you can apply. So these are 5 of them, 5 transformational policies that informed my decisions as to how to invest, when to invest, what kind of applications I should support, what kind of entrepreneurs, what kind of ideas. So number 1 is accelerated renewable energy growth, which is what we do. Invest in whatever we invest, to make it sustainable. Number 2, how can we accelerate the productivity growth? We know now that the population on the planet will increase significantly, and we need to feed them. Number 3, new development models. How can we learn what was done right by China and South Korea and so on? How can we reduce inequality and redistribute wealth? This is something that all of us can do. And number 5 is investment in education. And in my case, how can we apply the UN Sustainable Development Goals within gender equality and in the entrepreneurial way? So given the fact that I'm a computer scientist, I do care about technology a lot. And yes, tomorrow's speed of change will make us look like crawling. And so one thing that I've not seen at this conference is a lot of discussion that comes or gravitates around this area. This is really, really important. So the fact that we're not talking about it tells me personally that it's not on our radar and we need to change it. So what do I do? How do I apply these 5 things within my own activities to integrate the traditional investing that has been focused and still is? We live in a society that focuses on profit only, on one hand, and traditional philanthropy that tried to set off what's not done right, the for-profit only run, and the integration between these two, and what are the ways that we're looking on right now. So for instance, impact investing is on the horizon, and if you look at the way it is being applied, even there you see different ways. Financial only or impact only, or financial first or impact first, which of course is, in my view, strange because we need to do it all. And this is what I stand for. This is what integral investing is actually supposed to do. And here I am looking at, I'm sharing with you, you can only achieve what you measure. So what do we measure? So traditional investing looks at profit only, which is the current paradigm. If you look at impact investing, it tried to integrate people, planet, and profit. But if you look in detail, then you see that they either do social entrepreneurs, social only, or renewable energies, climate. And of course, the truth is the combination thereof. And in our little way, in our own family office, we are integrating integrating the people, planet, and profit by applying what I came across, what's called the integral model, Ken Wilber integral theory. And this is, of course, a whole lot of stuff that goes in there. I don't know how many more minutes I have. Not many. But this is a way, 3 more. So this is a way that helps us look. It's a lens. We're changing the lens because you can only see as to the level of, you know, how good your glasses are. So we have extended our glasses to look at the interior dimensions, the culture, but also the individual development, and also how that manifests on the outside. Again, I've written a book on this. It's coming out because many, many people have asked us how we've done it, because this system that we have applied over the past 20 plus years is extremely successful financially. So we've actually proven that if you include people and the planet in the conversation, you also reduce your risk, and the result is, of course, better financial return, which, of course, you could use to, you know, make a difference. So what is the process? Within the investment process, particularly early stage, this is what I do. I invest in young entrepreneurs. Goes through starts with deal screening. It goes through the due diligence process, which I will unpack a little bit. Then investment execution, when you decide to invest, what happens? Up to the monitoring, this is important. 3% of the investment amount that we perform, that we allocate, goes into developing the team, making sure that after the investment, the company really is able to get the support it needs in order to achieve what it has been decided collectively. And then up to the exit. So what is the due diligence process that is based, all of it is informed by the integral model by Ken Wilber. But the due diligence process has 5 steps. The first one is the traditional one. That's what every investor does, venture capital or business angel, business plan, marketing, blah, blah, blah. And we decided to get rid of the lying. Because what's actually happening right now, the VCs lie to the GPs, to the general partners, to their investors. Oh, I'm going to deliver you the 10x, the unicorn, blah, blah, blah. And then the entrepreneur doesn't have a choice. He has to say, oh, here's the J-curve. So we decided to get rid of that. So what is the truth in there? You know, what are we doing together, not for the sake of money and the 10x and the unicorn, and everyone is running after those unicorns, but to save ourselves, to have an integral way of looking, integrate the people, planet, and profit with passion and purpose, because it's about us. You're going to die. Nobody's going to take any of the stuff that we have with us. Where are we coming from? Where are we going? And we're taking that into this consideration. So in terms of step 1, everyone knows what that is. I'm not going to go into it. I only have 2 more minutes. Step 2, and here's where the difference comes in. I know it's not 2 minutes. I'm actually through, aren't I? This is where the difference comes in. It's the UN SDGs applied within planetary boundaries. And how we do that, there are many, many measurement criteria, gears and GIN and IRIS and you name them, we have them. And so this is extremely important. There are very few people who do this. 3 is the individual assessment, and I spoke yesterday I got a PhD in psychology because I wanted to know how people evolve, how I evolve. You know, how do we reach the top of the Maslow pyramid? It's not an easy thing. But there are many ways of achieving that. This is a selection of many lines of development, many intelligences along which we evolve. And step 3, goes into the details. We use the Harvard Development Model, the LDMA is called. We also use the sentence completion test. We had Liora talk about yesterday about Suzanne Cook-Reuter's model, also Harvard graduate. We apply that. And what we are looking for, of course, is people who are evolved, who will keep their promises, because there's so many egocentric people who would tell you a great deal, but at the end they don't mean it. So how do you ensure that the promise will be kept? And so this is one model that I wanted to share. So we look for the top 3%, 3 to 4% of people who are showing up in terms of, with an idea and want to be funded. Then the team assessment, 80% of the risk of any investment is associated with the team. If the team fails, the investment fails. So this is extremely important. Here we also use a bunch of tools. And then we make our decision whether to invest or not. And with that, I'm actually done. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it was a very interesting presentation. Now I will ask Aleksandra Drecun.
Just a few sentences. A father and his son are in a car accident. The father does not survive, and the son is badly injured. An ambulance takes the son to the hospital where the surgeon cries out, "I cannot operate because this boy is who?" Father and son in a car accident, entering emergency. The surgeon says, "I cannot operate." Why? No. No. Irrelevant, yeah.
Does not have health insurance.
So, yeah. We all face this. The surgeon says, "It's my son," and it's a she. She's a surgeon. Building on what Mr. Jacobs said before, it's crucially important to know ourselves, to be good humans, to be good citizens, to apply psychological knowledge, to learn about how we think, and to try to somehow overcome our biases. And we are not guilty of those biases because most of those biases are unconscious. So I've taken as my professional, to a certain extent, an individual mission to try to use every opportunity like this one where we have multiple stakeholders, people from different walks of life, researchers, policymakers, and others, to talk about this topic. Let me just show you another example. So the topic is gender and debiasing based on gender. Quickly. As till 70s, only 5% of musicians performing in the top 5 orchestras in the US were women. Today, probably even close to 40. What was done? What happened? Again, I would ask those who know just to abstain for helping others. What they have done to increase without compromising excellence. Anyway, we are in a closed circle and it's completely fine. We are all biased to a certain extent, so just use that hint. So orchestras in the US, then throughout the world, have started blind auditions behind the curtains when they invite new members to their orchestras. They just let them play behind the curtain. Recently, that has even improved. They ask them to take off their shoes. Because when I walk, you can somehow assume that it's a woman. So this wasn't very expensive. This wasn't too complicated. And it's a technical fix to a much larger problem. And I'm not assuming here that technical fixes are going to resolve all management and leadership issues, but this is just a teaser and a thing that we could perhaps all remember in making decisions, and in making decisions to debias ourselves, to debias our organizations, and eventually to help everyone grow to their potential, including in education. So, of course, in those development goals, target for 7, goal 4 on education looks at global citizenship education, education for sustainable development, and it looks to ensure that all learners also are aware of gender inequality and are working, as you have mentioned, and as many people have mentioned today and tomorrow, to somehow improve the situation in that field. I have many more examples that I can show you that are related to business, to technology, to different walks of life. I will just quote this one, the first one, Howard versus Heidi case, which is extremely important. At Harvard Business School, a case was written about Heidi Roosevelt, who was a successful entrepreneur, how she built her networks, how she succeeded, and students were asked, do they like their style? At a certain point, 5 years after the case was produced, they just changed the name from her name Heidi to Howard. And they've given different cases, same cases, story, only with different names to 2 groups. Much more people liked Howard and wanted to work with him than Heidi. Why is that so? We can talk a lot about it, but for women, when they're ambitious, when they're direct in communication, they're often perceived as aggressive and abrasive. For men, it's less so. They're just persistent, straightforwarded, mission-oriented. To gender, we should, of course, add race and many other things, because it's also something which might surprise us. People of color plus gender equals to this. Women of color that are straightforward, ambitious and direct are more likable according to the perceptions. Men of color who are very ambitious and show their ambition openly are not that much liked by the society. So obviously gender equality is definitely a moral imperative, but there are so many other areas in which this matters, and this is not, we do not have enough time, and this is not the moment where we can discuss that. But definitely one of the things that we could focus on are those unconscious biases. I suggest you that you test yourselves at one of the best tools there that exists. It's Harvard Implicit Association Test. Google has also produced its own unbiasing tools. Science Foundation Ireland has its own training, and all, I was a reviewer a few weeks ago there, we have all been obliged to undergo that training of unbiases ourselves. You can look at racial biases. One thing which was in particularly interesting, at that world level study, Serbs came out as the least racial people of all the nations. Knowing our image, it's interesting and important to analyze that. We've been the part of the non-aligned movement. We're not exposed to that many people of different race and color. But there are many interesting things, and if you have time, please go there, test yourself, and learn while you are going through that exercise. It's extremely useful. So I'll skip what we've been doing in different projects at the European level, at the international level. I'll skip these goals because we have discussed them so much and many times. I'll just go to one project which I find particularly important. But first, I will ask you just to try to remember what needs and what can be done and what we should work on in the next probably decades, not only until these goals are fulfilled, because it's not going to be soon. So when dealing with gender and numbers and fixing, the first obvious thing is fixing the number. That goes without saying, and it's already there. Some quotas, women in academia, women in business, I won't elaborate on that. The second thing is something that was mentioned so many times, it's institutions. We need to fix the institutions, the way they function, who is in the leadership, what are the processes, and so on and so on. But the important thing, which I want to stress here, because this is the Academy of Arts and Sciences, is that we need to fix the knowledge. what would that mean? So I'll skip the figures. There you see how women are in majority when they enter universities, more women graduate, more women enroll in master's studies, but then when career progresses, women go down, men go up. And it's a chart, I think, known to many, so I will skip the figures. I have it here in case anyone is interested. But this is, I think, very, very important. Research to date has not been unbiased. Do we know much about the other gender, usually women? And I'll here won't go into making the difference between gender and sex. I'll also leave it for some other occasion because it takes time. But theory has done a lot in social sciences, but not that much in technology, in medicine, in sciences that are so important for climate change. You would think that this is impossible, but Nature, the magazine that we all know so well, only in 2010 asked for the data if the research in medicine was done on female samples as well. Until 2010, we wouldn't know. Majority of research worldwide is done on male stem cells. In the US, 10 medicines have been taken out of the market. 7 of them had worse effects on women. The Lancet and many other important institutions are following, but only now, in this decade, these days. And to me, I'm not from that field. It was really counterintuitive. I would never think that only male stem cells were used in medical research. And I spoke to many colleagues here. There are many reasons. One of them because it's much easier. Hormones are not of the same kind. And it's very difficult to find matching female stem cells, but that's also for another time and another occasion. So when we speak of women, usually the technical products are also not made for them. And that famous dilemma, shrink it or pink it, usually ends up being just of smaller size and a different color. I couldn't resist to point to a very well-known person here, because we are in Serbia, we definitely need to brag about one of us. But it's also related to Harvard Business Review research, which says that women respond better than men to competitive pressure. They analyze tennis players, people who are in judo, and I'll just go to that final conclusion. Physically speaking, men are still stronger than women on average. But if you're talking about mental toughness, maybe in certain circumstances, women have the edge. And I'll leave you with this slide. It's an important, long-lasting project that is performed by Stanford in the US and by many of us in Europe through the European Commission Horizon Project and COST Project. It's on gendered innovations. There you can find different research papers and cases which look into health. For instance, for men, osteoporosis is also important for men, but it's usually not being taken seriously by them. And engineering and technology, at environmental, and many other cases which show differences like those that I mentioned. For instance, the dummies used for tests are made only after male body and are the size of men. Only recently in this decade it has been changed. And it's also one thing that we can remember easily. So what could be done? First of all, excellence is based on diversity. Creativity and knowledge needs to be grown from diversity and looking at all the aspects. There is no excellence if we are not looking at all the aspects and all the differences. We need to make women visible. We'll talk about it some other time again. We need to secure top-level support for these changes. We need definitely to increase the number of women in decision-making bodies, because seeing is believing, and we all need to go through some unconscious bias education and training. This was very broad and very simple intentionally. You can, for yourselves, just think of all kinds of trainings we need to offer children, toddlers, to children in kindergarten, to professors, to all of us who are involved in living on this planet, which wants to be sustainable. Because only if we include all the aspects, we can have sustainability and excellence that we are all looking for. And it's about us, individuals. We can start from ourselves, debias ourselves, and then work in every field and use every opportunity that we have to help others to grow into that direction. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for a very inspirative talk. While you were talking, I was counting. Here we have 8-to-7 ratio among participants, excluding technicians. So we are... Okay, Mr. Now Radmilo Pešić, please.
The topic of my presentation is about networks, network knowledge for the 21st century. Networks are a way of communicating, they are nowadays way of thinking and way of acting in modern times. Actually, network theory as a foundation of modern thinking started with the views of two prominent Hungarian mathematicians, Paul Erdős and Alfred Rényi. They started working together in 1948 and they developed a mathematical framework of functioning of any interlinked group of entities, so-called nodes, and the links between them, so-called edges. The later development of this theory enabled us to understand material networks, energy networks, and information networks, giving us a very powerful tool for comprehending nature and society. We are particularly interested in social and economic networks. Economy is a network by itself. It consists of producers, consumers, and their linkages. Markets are networks also. Invisible hand of market is, in fact, a function of the network. Rationality of market economy is a network rationality and is always higher than the sum of individual rationalities. Until recently, economists viewed economy as a set of autonomous individuals that are linked via price system only. However, network perspective offers a different approach. Our education system, therefore, should not ignore the fact that the more complex we are, the more we have to be interlinked. And sustainable development also is a network. It should be also treated in a network perspective. If we want to create and disseminate a viable and constructive knowledge for the 21st century, we must stop using 19th century paradigm on isolated and optimizing perfectly rational individuals. There is a very good quotation given by a Hungarian mathematician also. He said, whereas the 20th century was seen as a century of physics, the 21st is often predicted to be a century of biology. It will most likely be a century of complexity. And complexity is a consequence of network structure of the nature and society. So sustainability concept is a network concept. Sustainable development goals are interlinked, interconnected, and they cannot be achieved separately. Understanding the interlinkages among the goals and targets is crucial for integrated governance and policy coherence in implementing sustainable development strategies. Here is a pioneering paper by Leblanc about sustainable development goals as a network and targets which linked all together. This was a pioneering paper. In 2017, another paper appeared as an elaboration of the same methodology. The paper is made by Jo and Moinuddin, and the point, quite a complex image, as you can see, interlinks between different sustainable development goals. But the point is that this paper is focused on a number of Asian countries and their network of sustainable development goals and targets under their specific conditions, including India, China, Japan, Korea, and other countries. Networks are not only around us. Networks are sources of knowledge. In November 2009, an online open source platform called Climate CoLab was launched by Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Just 20 clever people launched this platform. The goal was to crowdsource the process of finding solutions for the global climate change. Now, this 10 years later, this network gathers more than 115,000 scholars. Most of us are scholars. We are interlinked in an effort to produce viable solutions on all levels using various types of knowledge, benefiting from a multidisciplinary approach. By now, Climate CoLab have produced, all the participants have produced and evaluated more than 2,000 proposals for how to solve many aspects of climate change: local, regional, national, international, global, problems of mitigation, problems of adaptation. And we are also expected to evaluate other proposals, not only to give our proposals, but also to give evaluation of other proposals that we feel that we may be competent for. And this is an example of innovative, productive, and efficient use of networks for the global scientific progress. So the point is, and my question is, how to educate students for it. There is a kind of network-based education. There is a concept of network-based educations, and sometimes it is said that teachers should serve as a network administrators. Modern knowledge largely depends on our ability to make networks or to join the existing networks. The more complex technology we use, less useful is our individual knowledge. So our ability, where to find knowledge, how to make network, how to be linked, and with whom is very important for the development on 21st century knowledge. But many questions still remain. How to motivate students to join the existing networks, or how to make new networks? Motivation depends on a simple relation between benefit of being linked, this is B, and it should be higher than costs, C, of networks. So benefit of networking depends on the value of network, and value of network, V, equals n number of nodes, number of components of network on n minus 1. The more nodes are, the greater is the benefit of network. The more people are on the internet, the greater is the benefit of the internet. The more people are on the Facebook, greater is the benefit of having access to the Facebook. On the other side, we have costs of networking. We have investment costs needed for creating networks or joining the existing networks, paying certain fees for that, and operation costs of maintaining linkages between nodes. The problem is not only how to motivate students, but how to teach them how to behave in a network environment. There is a problem of trust, how to find adequate sources and adequate information networks, how to comprehend the network goals. Is the network oriented towards good or bad goals? It's a matter of morality. How to recognize the network structure? It's a matter of complexity. How to communicate with other network members, nodes? This is a matter of social skills. And the very important question, is there an authority on the network And who is the authority? Many more questions are to be answered, but networks are and will remain being a crucial component of the human existence. Networks are all around us, and we must be prepared to obtain the greatest benefit from networking. We have to try to avoid all traps of networking. So educating students for the interlinked world is the only way to achieve sustainable future for the mankind and for this planet. References are here. All the questions are welcome. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now I would like to open discussion. I would like to ask you some. Mariana, please. Yes. Okay.
I have a question.
Okay, please.
My question is to you. Whether you know whether AI has been used at MIT, I know they're very advanced, in order to mitigate, or whether there is some influence on the mitigation function, on the interpretation of those papers. The reason I'm asking is we are using crowdsourcing for investment decisions. So, and artificial intelligence can be leveraged in a good way for this kind of, for all the topics that you actually addressed. Are you aware of that? I mean, whether or not, you don't have to know it, but I was just curious.
Actually, I can't give you the right answer. I know that there is a strong foundation behind the project. It is sponsored by Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And there is an annual award awarded to the people whose projects are nominated as a successful projects for certain activities. But I cannot tell you exactly, is it crowdfunding or something else? Probably a huge
No, that was not the question.
Yeah.
Not crowdfunding, crowdsourced.
Crowdsourced.
AI-based crowdsource.
I don't
for
know.
The interpretation. Because if we're talking about 115,000 papers, that's
Even
a
more
lot.
at the moment.
And so if we do not use artificial intelligence to really leverage all this amazing knowledge, we're missing something really important, I believe. That's why I'm asking.
Oh, yes. Artificial intelligence is absolutely used for this purpose, and it can be seen on this. We have a website, very rich climate collab, and you may see all the projects, all the participants, all the ideas. So we have a quite rich database, and it is used.
So the database does apply AI knowledge.
Yes,
okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. That was the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Zbigniew Bochniarz, Koźmiński University, Warsaw. I have a question to Radmilo. Thank you for interesting presentation. I'll be delighted if we will get the presentation PDF, because it's hard to read, on the screen. But my question is, because you raised before the end of your presentation about the issue of hierarchy. So what is your thought about our networks, hierarchical or flat? Initially, the networks were created to show the alternative form of coordination to market and centrally planned economy, which was very hierarchical. It's supposed to be neutral. Everybody can join and leave, However, when we see that there are within the network, there are some information hubs which have more information than the other participants, so somehow they have a power of information, of having information, processing information, taking advantage of this. But still, I believe this is still non-hierarchical. However, with all this unethical behavior of extracting data from the participants of the network, we see that possessing information is a form of power these days. And so, but still, you know, I am puzzled whether is this hierarchical or not, and how to treat this. Okay, what is your thought? Because I strongly believe in network, and I encourage our students. We work with them, I mean, using virtual university, and for the projects we have all networks, and I mean, this is a great invention, and I see the power. I do research now on the network in life science industry in Washington State, and a few years ago I completed with my international team research on networking in aerospace industry. I mean, I see network as a form of social capital, but they create the trust. But if some members do not behave ethically, they can destroy the trust, what is the major product and the value of the network. So, you know, I mean, if you are in the network, you need to follow certain norms and standards, you know, otherwise you should be excluded. So what is your thought about? But again, it's for sustainability and for sharing information about implementation of CDGs, it's very important form of social organization. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this question. I also have many doubts about this specific issue, and I think the role of network administrators is crucial. So their ethical standards, their morality, and their mission is crucial for network operation. But on the other side, we have a problem, we have a permanent problem of distinguishing between right and wrong information, between false and true information. Yesterday, our colleague from Italy, Marco Vitello, pointed that in his discussion, and this is a real problem, how to teach students to discover what is right, what is wrong, how to prepare them. First of all, we have to be prepared, teachers, but we are unprepared. I think that technology is running in front of us. We are lagging behind the technology, no matter how proactive we are, but I'm afraid we are running behind the existing technology. So there is a serious problem of morality, of network behavior, and it's very important to try to teach students how to behave on the networks. This is my answer at the moment.
Can I add something to that? We are building what we call teal organizations based on the integral model by Ken Wilber. That's based on, you know, an organization called teal. If you're not familiar with it, I'd highly recommend looking into Reinventing Organization. It's a book written by, what's his name? A guy who used to work at McKinsey, Frédéric Laloux. And he's building what we call holacracy-based organizations, or holarchy, where you have hierarchies, but also heterarchy, which is more or less what the internet is. And so you could bring the intelligence at every node. You talked about the many nodes at every level. So I think I agree with you that the network operators are important functions, but they're totally overwhelmed. I mean, they can't, I mean, look at Facebook. They can't even manage their own stuff, and they should be able to, given the AI that they have. So it is an amazing proposition. So that's a big issue that we need to address. And but the mindset as to in what direction we should look, I think Laloux's Reinventing Organizations could give them a direction in that.
I mean, if there are no other, the issue is with the network I mean, when we're talking about networks, you know, and I am big enthusiast of the networks, but we have serious problems in terms of the ethics in the symmetry of benefits. If the administrator is, you know, overpowered or using for just the very greedy purposes, and then, you know, giving, you know, very dishonest answer. I remember the question of senator from Minnesota, former senator. He asked Mark Zuckerberg, you know, are you part of the representative of the one of the most intelligent corporation? He said, yes. Well, how couldn't you get together dots that if somebody is paying you in rubles, might be a Russian? Period. Because it was about the Russian interference in American elections. So the greed prevented them to really check, you know, these fake accounts, you know, which appeared over there. Thank you.
And I would, sorry.
Just think about Wikipedia and tremendous manipulations that can be found on Wikipedia sites. Although Wikipedia is a recognized source of knowledge.
And no women. A Nobel Prize laureate as a woman, she was not allowed. Yeah. That's exactly the bias that Aleksandra was talking about. And with respect to Facebook, I would really highly invite you to use this, and also Eliora, she talked about this, to use this knowledge and look at when we listen to Zuckerberg, for instance, he really wants world domination, and this is exactly what he's got. And it's only now that the government is, and the people are rising up, that he is being, you know, told, don't do that. But that's what he wants. And if you get involved with the people who work with him, who started, you know, the company who invested in him, they're all going away because he wants world domination. So we need to really rise, go, take up to the streets.
And who knows who is behind Mark Zuckerberg? Have you thought about it? Who is hidden behind this? Probably someone more influential than he himself. He's just, maybe he's just a dummy.
Maybe, yeah, you're right.
So we should think in this direction.
Could I, Radmilo, say something about skepticism vis-a-vis the network concept? I'm following a friend of mine and previous discussion. There is stochastic networks in which causal chronological order doesn't exist. So you diminished the chronological and hierarchical system with this proposition. Also, my standpoint is that strategy make value, not technology. So my suggestion to you to expand this fertile idea is to concentrate on the concept of business platform or exponential value chain. Exponential, because majority of linear value chains are transformed in exponential value chains. And it could be the good idea for framing the all flows of resources, informations, and know-how in this context. This is my suggestion.
Thank you, my respected colleague. Thank you.
I expected that we will have much more discussion about gender issue, but let's take just a few words about it, because you were focused on the male-female disbalance, but it is not the case in all, let's say, trades, and especially in medicine. You will find much more ladies working in the medicine than males. And we were talking about how to rectify this disbalance and offer to the males positions in medicine. So there is I fully understand and fully support your speech, but we should be objective and take into account that there are some traits which are not even offered for males to be educated for. And it is not in case in Serbia. It is, for example, in Austria. For example, males could not be midwives. It is forbidden to enroll for become a midwife in Austria for a male. So we should talk, let's say, on both sides and have more balanced view on gender disparities. I believe that for each trade, it is very good to have balance, 50-50, in every segment of life, because we are born in that way. About half of population is male and half population is female. More or less, it is percent or more is disbalanced. So we should think in that way, not on the way women are neglected. We should push them. It is then we will create another case of disbalance, and they will feel offended with this if you treat women as minorities. We should treat them equally.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you for the note, because it gives me opportunity to stress that definitely it's a whole, and there are differences, but we can only perform well and produce excellent results if we work together.
As a team.
As you mentioned, the medical careers, did you think of Serbia?
It is not Serbian problem. It is general one.
So in the U.S., majority of surgeons are men. In many professions in Serbia, we do have, as a legacy of socialist times, but also because of the economic situation, more women in certain positions than men, because those very well respected occupations are not paid well. So in many places, doctors receive much more than in Serbia. You can see that in also other areas of life. So I fully agree. In most of the cases I had on that chart that were about medical cases were about the fact that some of the diagnoses that are traditionally female and related to women actually are very important, and in some cases much more important for men, but traditionally only women are checked up for during their checkups for certain of those diseases, and so on and so on. So I do definitely agree, and we need to look at it. And there is another thing, gender as a construct, sex, what is gender, and so on, but definitely, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Your point.
So it is, oh, there is one question more, sorry.
Very short reflection about this question. I'm always fascinating with some extraordinary woman exceptionalism about women. I think that the things are very simple. Women have some limits, biological, family limits in providing professional career. But some, let's say, ambition women are in some sense frustrated when they targeted C-level position. And they generalize all vertical axis of the possible position. So maybe you can declare myself as a chauvinist, but the things are not in some extremes. Something is in between, I think. There is no reason for dramatization of this problem. This is my opinion.
Jordan Peterson worked on this. Jordan Peterson is, if you know, Jordan Peterson, he addressed that issue big time. And I would also like to invite men to emancipate themselves.
Okay.
I think this is big.
Okay.
Important.
As economist, of course, I am always telling that discriminating any gender is against sustainability because you are losing resources. But so if you look, as economist, I'm interested in competitiveness. If you look at the most competitive economies over the last 10 years, the Scandinavians are always on the top. Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and so on. So, and then they institutionalized, and now, I mean, this is the rule, you know, that they have equal political representation. I observed the rise of women movement in Poland, you know. So it was really over the last 10, 11 years. I think that Mariana attended one of the, I guess, 11 or 12 women congresses. So the issue is to institutionalize the right. So they made a simple, you know, request, and then they collected million signatures to have at least each gender, not women, but each gender, at least 35% on the list to the parliamentary, in all elections. Now we have like 40% of women in the parliament, and they are really doing very well. I mean, there is a big change in American parliament now. I mean, women brings, you know, like, you know, also disabled people, they bring very original thoughts. We don't think, you know, that it's happened. It enrich the discussion. And of course, each gender has some advantages and limitations. This is normal, you know, but this is the diversity. This, for the sake of diversity and elimination of discrimination, we should really give them access, you know, and also with all this LGBT and so all this stuff, you know, because we are losing the human potential. And then let them, you know, speak, have equal access and equal pay. Thank you.